Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to give senators an idea of what we would be doing today in what order. So at this point, we'll move to the budget, followed by, assuming we have time, H949, the yield bill, at which point, if we have time, we would move to the top of the calendar, which would be H940 for third reading. With that, Mr. President, I'm hoping we can move to H951, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government.
Orders of the day. We have on the calendar for action H951, which was passed by the House on April 22nd, 2026. It was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that the Senate propose to the House that the bill be amended as it appears in the addendum to the Senate calendar of April 22, 2026, and that with such proposal of amendment, the bill ought to pass. Affecting the revenues of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Finance, which recommends that the bill ought to pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations. Listen to the second reading of the bill.
H951, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government.
Recognize the senator from Washington District for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. President. So similar to the caucus of the whole presentation, I'll try not to be too repetitive of that, but I will be giving a brief remarks of the big picture, and then I will go through the parts of the budget that were assigned to me, and then we will go through all members of the committee assignments in order, so you can hear what the different committee members kind of worked on, during our process and as we made these decisions. We will be, I think, mainly using the addendum and the web report changes as we go through. At least that's how I'm doing it. So the big picture, it is a balanced budget based on those 4 budget principles of it's a balanced budget, staying within our means, meeting basic needs of Vermonters, saving for an uncertain future, but at the same time making investments for an economic development so that we have an economic engine to help us meet those future needs. So with that, I will go through the parts of this budget that were assigned to me. I had the least amount as the chair. It's the chair's prerogative to assign the least, but I still had 10 of them. I had the Agency of Administration, I had the Tax Department, Building and General Services, the Governor's Office, the Legislature's budget, CFO's budget, the Lieutenant Governor's budget, the State Treasurer and all the pension and labor stuff that goes with that, the Attorney General's Office, the Department of Finance and Regulation, the Secretary of State, the Vermont Veteran Zone. So just give you an example of all those 10 sections of government. Other folks, I think Senator Norris has the most sections of government that they'll be going through. So I'm going to go through the web report, and I'm not going to go over everything, because we don't want to be here that long. So I'm just going to go through things that I thought were changes to those sections that I had that I thought were important. So right on the first page of the web report, page 1, you'll see the tax administration. The House gave the tax department $135,000 for the changes to the homestead declaration from Act 73. So this is our process of getting to the second home tax, basically. So this is an example of a change made from the governors. Since we agreed with the House, there's no further changes, as you'll see on this report. So I thought that was important to mention. The Sergeant at Arms, the next one down, B128, the same page, $60,000 requested for the increased security of the single point of entry. So we added that. The State Treasurer had a lot of requests. We didn't fund all of them, but one of the things was to switch the healthcare retirement funds. Right now they were the OPEB. These can be managed by the treasurer. And our current treasurer has some background in this, was managing it, but the fund is getting to the size where would want a professional manager. And that's what VPIC does with all the other pension funds. So this moves money from the treasurer's, moves the obligation to manage the OPEB funds from the treasurer's office to VPIC, which is the Pension Investment Council, where they're professional fund managers managing that money instead of the treasurer, which you don't know who's going to get elected treasurer. So this is shown as a savings on page as one. And then later you'll see on page 3 at the top of the page, the VPIC position being funded. There is also a position at the top of page 2 for the treasurer for an additional position within the pension division of the treasurer's office, because we have more going on, more people in the pension system. This is a position that helps state workers as they navigate the whole retirement. D132 on page 2 is also a change to the treasurer's office. This is a position that the House had allowing another position, unclaimed property. The unclaimed property division in the treasurer's office has grown quite substantially. There's more and more unclaimed property with more digital accounts. It's easier for people to forget that they bought 10 Bitcoin, in 1999 or whatever, and then they forget about it, and it required to go to every state has this unclaimed property. So there's more actions, there's more fraud attempts, more people trying to take that money that it's not theirs. So they needed another position. It's funded from the money that's generated, so it's not general funds. So we thought that was important, and we're hoping that it actually brings more money to the general fund from the unclaimed property. Because after like 10 years, if the money hasn't been claimed, it's still obligated. If you have unclaimed property, and I recommend everybody to go to the website and type in your name to see if you have any. But even after 10 years, even if they've reverted to the general fund, it's still owed by you, so you can make a claim at any time. So the B133 on page 2 is some changes that I already talked about the OPEB funds. That's moving those around. Some of this payment for these positions coming from the trust funds themselves. Down at the bottom is the VPIC, or the Vermont Pension Investment Commission. They are getting a new position because they have to take on this new responsibility of managing the funds. You'll see the Ethics Commission that we talked about before on that page, B136.1. We did create 30 new positions, and so it's not that there's not value in the Ethics Commission, but we're trying to keep to that number of 30 positions, which is what the House did, more than the governor did. And so it was one of those tough decisions of all the different positions that we had to fund, which ones we were going to fund. You'll see the renter rebate at B138 from the finance amendment, which is an example of how this gets shown in the budget. That's on page 3. On page 4, the Attorney General. This was something that I thought was really important. This is money they have a position in the AG's office for a home improvement specialist. This was a limited service position, and we made it permanent, included the funds in the base. Doesn't get paid a lot, but this makes it a base position. The person is actually saving Vermonters money by helping navigate home improvement fraud and disagreements when a contractor and a homeowner can't agree on things. This person has been reported to be very helpful for Vermonters in those situations. So we wanted to make sure that was in the base funding and not one time every year. So that's what that is. Next one I wanted to point out is on page 6, Secretary of State. There was a grant for the VAN, or the Vermont Access Network. This is the cable access TV stations around the state. That money flows through the Secretary of State. This is an increase of this amount. And the Senate also have put in the money for the child care licensing program. That bill S206 was passed. that was worth pointing out and mentioning. So there's several pages about AHS and public safety that I didn't have, so I'm not going to go over that. So each member is going to go over their sections, and unfortunately, it's not going to go in order. So we're going to jump around the addendum and the web report a little bit. So the next one I wanted to bring up was all the way on page 19 under the Agency of Administration. Just some of the good work that the governor funded, that the Office of Racial Equity is continuing their IDEAL program, which is an acronym that you'll see there, $110,000. The last year of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, $900,000. We'll be getting that report next year. And then you'll see this 1.3 million change. It looks like the Senate took it out, but you'll see in the note there, this is money from the Northeast Kingdom floods from last year, where we applied for FEMA and FEMA denied it. We appealed to FEMA denied our appeal. So making that disaster relief, making those towns whole with this funding, the Senate position is that it should go through the AOT budget because most of this work in these towns was culverts and roads. So it made more sense to go through AOT, and that was a request from the administration. Another change, page 23, the Secretary of State. Every 2 years, the Secretary of State needs one-time appropriations to run the elections. So there's $450,000 for them to run the elections, which are getting more complicated and more like threats to election security. There's also some money we put for the Vermont Access Network, the VAN. There's money in there for the Access TV. There's also money in here for the community radio program that VAN has with, I think, 11 different community radio stations around the state. And then something we did last year that the House continued and we agreed with is the local civic journalism awards, which act as celebrating our local journalists and also providing some small amount of financial support for our local networks, whether they be TV, radio, or print, that are really covering local civics, so like select board meetings and the planning board meetings and the development review board meetings, as well as just what's happening at the local school board. So this kind of not national news, it might not even be state news, but trying to keep a really healthy journalism ecosystem in Vermont. And this $50,000 is matched by the Vermont Foundation for another $50,000 to provide a little more money to these struggling news outlets. The other one I wanted to bring up is Office of the Treasurer. Again, on page 25, these are one-time appropriations that are talked about. One, the unclaimed property. They're voluntary. They do a volunteer program, help people do their income tax. There's an income tax assistance program, $150,000. And then I thought this was important, is $50,000 we gave the Treasurer's Office to study moving all public employees into the same healthcare plan. So all municipal workers are in one plan, all state workers are in another plan. If we were to maybe merge those and have a bigger pool, we could help lower healthcare costs. So before we do that, this $50,000 we'll look at what are the savings, what's the best way to do that, what are the possible benefits and possible costs of doing that. The other one, let's see, so that was all the things I wanted to bring up in the web report for my sections. So let me see in the addendum, I thought there was a couple of things I wanted to make sure that people knew about. I already talked about the contingency fund or the contingency transactions on page 61, so I won't bring that up again. The money that we're putting aside for next year on page 64, I already told you about that. On page 71, this is something I didn't talk about, and this is, you won't see in the sheets because it deals with money that was expended before. So this is section B1100 on page 71. you'll see existing language that was $11 million was general fund was appropriated to public safety for a regional dispatch funding. There was a task force. There was a bunch of work done. Those that have been on government ops, I've talked about this a lot. That $11 million, most of it had been spent. The task force came out with their proposal this year, spending most of it. There's 2.5 million that we're appropriating here to follow the state plan and do the first part of a statewide simulcast dispatch system. This $2.5 million to a $3.5 million project in the central Vermont region. They already have $1 million. They've already gone to bid. They thought they were going to get some of this grant money a year ago. So they're kind of shovel ready with a simulcast system that will reach all the way to portables. We've had an issue with if you're on a scene, a fire scene or a crime scene, and you're on your portable radio, you can't contact the dispatcher. You got to go back to your vehicle. So this will allow you to make contact dispatchers from your handhelds. So it's a first step in funding. What we really need is a statewide simulcast synchronized dispatch system. But since it's existing, since it's money from an existing appropriation, you don't see it in the other sheets. I had mentioned this briefly on page 78, the state employee compensation study language. That is something different, and I think an important as we look at the growing gap we have between executive pay and classified pay, because they each get the same percentage, but when you're adding the percentage to somebody making $200,000, they're growing faster than the average state employee that's making $58,000 or whatever the average is. So we have this formula in statute, so the difference between the highest and the medium is getting greater over time. That delta is growing, not because of any kind of conscious choice we're making to pay them more, but because the formula is being applied to different numbers. And as you know your math, you apply the percentage to a larger number, it's going to be a bigger dollar increase. So this just looks at that issue and asks HR to say, should we be doing it differently? Is there something we could do differently in that? And as we gave them money last year to do a whole reclassification of the state system, the Willis system that we use. I think we're the only one of 2 states that still use the Willis system. And this study will kind of help as we're looking at reclassifying our whole pay structure for state employees. How would we maybe do this formula for the exempt executives at the same time? So, Mr. President, I think I also talked about the effective dates. That's an important part with the positions, with this contingency that we're only going to fund these positions if we don't have a downturn come July 30th. That's a distinct thing that we haven't done before. So with that, Mr. President, I am going to yield to other members. So I'm going to start and yield to the junior senator from Washington.
The senator from Washington yields to the junior senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be speaking to portions of the budget that cover the State Labor Relations Board, Vermont Community Broadband Board, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Environmental Conservation, Forest Parks and Recreation, and the Land Use Review Board. And then there's a few pieces of language that I'm also going to be covering. They're somewhat scattered throughout. So starting with B135, the State Labor Relations Board. So you would see that the Senate has a reduction in personal services there. That is in relation to a bill that created a position for a mediator. There had been federal mediators that folks could access in case there was a dispute, and that position has been eliminated federally, and so there was a bill to create a state position for a mediator, but our understanding is that there are private mediators that can be accessed for disputes like that, and so the Senate Appropriations Committee chose to reduce that position, so that's down there. The Vermont Community Broadband Board, this is actually just a technical correction. it would appear as though we have a down in the ARPA Capital Projects Fund of 338,000, but there's a corresponding up in federal funds, and that is actually just a clerical error that is being fixed there. It was in the wrong fund. For Fish and Wildlife, there's a couple of changes here worth noting. One is that there was there had been a down in the positions for Fish and Wildlife, but then it turned out that there was federal money for that, and so there was an up related to that position. And additionally, and this is related to language that is in the miscellaneous tax bill, there had been a proposal by Fish and Wildlife to create a new type of license for accessing the fishing access points. There's language in H 933 that rescinds that ability to create that license fee, but the Fish and Wildlife was anticipating that they would be earning $50,000 or so this year from that new license. And so just to keep them whole, there's an addition of $50,000 to make up for the loss of that money. And that was from the House, and that's unchanged from the House version. Moving on to Department of Environmental Conservation. A few things to note here. There were a couple of new positions. It looks as though the Senate just concurred with the House, but we did make some changes. The House had two positions for the Flood Safety Act. They had several positions that were requested at the time the bill went through, and they were not all funded. So this adds two to that that were previously not funded. They're for environmental analysts, particularly for river corridors. The Senate changed that, reduced it from two positions to one position for the river corridors in the Flood Safety Act. However, we added a position related to S218, which is the chloride bill. So no net change there. It's just a shuffling of what those positions were for. In the one-time portion of Forest Parks and Rec, there again, it looks like we agreed with the governor there, but there was again some shuffling of money. The House had some one-time money for VORIC grants, which is outdoor recreation. We ended up reducing that by $300,000, but then ended up increasing Serve, Learn, Earn by $300,000. So again, it's a wash relative to what the governor had recommended, but some shuffling of money there. And then again, in the one-time section for Department of Environmental Conservation, you'll see an increase of $200,000. That is for the chloride bill had some contract work that needed to be done to set up the program, and so that's in the one-time funds there at $200,000. The Land Use Review Board had some one-time funds associated with it as well, which is in relation to S325. You may recall that there were a couple of appropriations in there, and only one of them got funded. There was one appropriation for outreach to engage more with folks about how this ought to look moving into the future. And so that was kept in here at $100,000. There was another portion of the bill going to 802 homes that was not funded. And so that is the portions of the money that I wanted to speak to. But there is some language also. So the first part is in the E sections, E131.1, which has to do with the State PACE Reserve Fund. You may recall that we had a PACE bill go through the process, and as I was doing my due diligence on that, researching residential PACE, which already exists, discovered that there was a state PACE reserve fund, which was specifically associated with residential PACE. That money was created at the time that bill passed. It was at $50,000, and then hasn't been touched since then, as there hasn't been a need for it. And in fact, for residential PACE, there's only been about a dozen projects that were over a decade old, and that program is no longer being tracked. I think of this as like we're looking for loose change, like we're looking for in the couch cushions for money. So that is being swept back into the general fund. In E700, this has to do with the Lands and Facilities Trust Fund. There was a request from ANR to increase the amount that they are allowed to spend from that fund from 5% to 8%. And so beyond just the investment that the returns on that investment that they have, they do have other inputs of money going into that fund. So they felt comfortable that they'd be able to maintain in that 8% spending. But we did put in some belt and suspenders type language in there to ensure that that money does not end up going down. So we added that provided that the fund balance does not go below the prior fiscal year's ending fund balance, to ensure that they're not digging into the remainder of that fund beyond that what was allocated or what was available in the prior fiscal year. In E700.1 and 700.2, those two pieces go together. This has to do with recommendations regarding from the Climate Action Commission and the Volkswagen money that we were allocated to transition to reduce carbon pollution from vehicles. As that money is winding down, Vermont had some regulations to specify that the money could only be used for electrifying vehicles, though nationally that money was allowed to also transition to cleaner diesel. And as the money is running out, there was a worry that we wouldn't be able to spend all of it if that provision remained in place. And so this language removes that restriction that it's only for electrifying vehicles, and allows then for clean diesel to be used as part of that money. And then E702 is from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. This is language to study a potential equipment replacement fund. And so we'll be hearing about that in the next fiscal year to see if it would make sense for them to create an equipment replacement fund, similar to what we're doing for public safety, because as public safety is exploring or has that for, or is creating that for radios and for guns. The wardens for Fish and Wildlife also use radios and have need for guns and cars, et cetera. And so there's a thought that if that construct exists for public safety, should we have a similar construct for Fish and Wildlife? And so this is just a report to see if that would make sense. So those are the portions that I am reporting, and I am going to yield to the junior senator from Franklin County.
The senator from Washington yields to the senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. The areas I'll be covering will be ethics, court diversion, criminal justice training, liquor and lottery, cannabis control board, military, Department of Corrections, Department of Public Safety, state's attorneys and sheriffs, Center for Crime Victim Services, judiciary, defender general's office, and agriculture. But fortunately, many of those areas have already been covered. The Ethics Commission has been obviously talked about in great length here. Court diversion, there's been no change. The governor's recommend. Criminal Justice Center, no change there. Liquor and lottery is no change, it's fine. Cannabis is good. Military there's no change here with the exception, I might want to make mention that there were 6 new maintenance positions added to the military at a cost of $150,000 out of the general fund, because 75% of this is funded through the federal government. So I just want to make mention of that. So I will start on page 17, B202, the Defender General's office. And basically, back during the COVID times, the Defender General, because people were kind of isolated and really couldn't go out for training or whatever else, sought to make it better for the state, so he voluntarily gave back his $80,000 to appropriations because he couldn't do any training anyways. Obviously, that's been a couple of years ago, so he's been asking for his training money back. So what we did was, what the House did was they allocated $350,000, of which $50,000 of that can be directly pointed toward training. The other $300,000 can be used for contracted services and case-related administration. So my next section is 204, Judiciary. This was a bit of the cost for security for the court systems in and throughout the state of Vermont has risen exponentially. And there was an original figure put in of $75 per hour. Obviously, we in appropriations thought that was a bit of a stretch. They've gone from 54 to 57, so we agreed on the $60 per hour increase, or a total of $60 per, not a $60 increase, but the House put in $250,000 for that. And in the formulation that we had, which was supplied by our great JFO staff, the $75 an hour is going to come up to like $1.9 million. So we agreed upon the $60 fee, which the House put in $250, and we put in $476,000 in it to cover our courts throughout the state of Vermont. 205, the state's attorney's office is, the governor asked for vacancy savings. The House put back in their vacancy savings at $330,000 plus. And you'll see a trend as I go through this. Basically, what we did in appropriations was we halved everybody's vacancy savings, with the exception of, I believe, the Human Rights Commission, which we fully gave them their vacancy savings, along with, I don't know if we've been reporting on that or not. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder here. Another position, I believe. So basically, in the state's attorney's budget, excuse me, we took 165,000 plus out of there, and we gave them back 50% of their vacancy savings. 2061, which is the Crime Victims Advocate. Basically the same thing. The House put in 147,500. We cut that in half. We took 85,000 plus dollars out of that particular line item. B207, which is the sheriffs. The House once again gave them back their vacancy savings, and we have that also by $69,617. Center for Crime Victim Services, which is B220, if you're following along. There was a couple of different things that took place here. Was one, the House put in $100,000 for them to continue their grant administration's project. We took it out. We have since revisited our decision there. And because there was a direct allocation of $450,000 going through the Crime Center Victim Services to the Vermont network, it'll probably come up in conference, but we took the $100,000 back out and put it back into the grant administration services. They also had $137,500 taken from them, but not really, because it was put into DCF, because it was kind of a net neutral with an increase to the B317 on the general base, if you're following along. And then next would be B222, Agricultural Food Markets Administration. There was a position that they wanted, that they really wanted, and unfortunately we were unable to fill that position, so we took $111,000, almost $112,000 out of their request for that position. B338, Corrections and Correctional Services. There was really nothing that transpired here. House went along with the governor, Senate went along with the House. There was $850,000 that came into play during the course of this. And what that was, our pretrial supervision program, which is going to its third year now, has an allocation of $650,000 into the base. Obviously, the program over in the Northeast Kingdom, or close by, wasn't being worked as best that they could. There's 2 cases going over there, so they took it. They moved it to Chittenden County. And what was happening, we were duplicating the base monies going into that. So the House took out $850,000 out of that. And of that, $450,000 was allocated toward the Crime Center Victim Services. The other $350,000 went toward the Defender General's office to account for that $850,000. So it was just a a shifting of money, shall we say, but the House did take it out, put it back into the general fund, and then made the appropriations. B 1101, Agency of Agriculture and Food Markets. Basically, this has to do with NOFA and the cash crops and so on and so forth, and we've gone over that. We reduced funding for NOFA by $375,000 and reduced funding to the food banks, Feeding Vermont, by $290,000, but the chair explained as to how that came about and what went on with that. So, having said that, due to my report being half done by the chair, I appreciate that. I will now yield, Mr. President, to the senior senator from Lamoille.
Senator from Franklin yields to the senator from Lamoille.
Yeah, the only senator from Lamoille, so. My sections are first, the health department, and in the web report, the health department can be found on page 9. I'm only going to run through the changes within each of my areas. The biggest change within the health department was our move to get money into AHEC, which is recruitment of primary care doctors for the most part. And you'll see there's about 667,000 that is moved into that. The House moved some money in. They didn't fund exactly what they thought they did, so but that's where you'll find the AHIC money. And I might say these are sections 311, 312, and 313. You'll also find here Bridges to Health, a $350,000 addition. The Senate, that's the health care for migrant workers. You'll also see in these sections the money for the free and referral clinics, which is split 462,000 federal and 462,000 general fund. You'll also see in here, we added language for substance use and disorder residential treatment. We had money set aside from last year to, we add that in as a use of the money that we had set aside for last year. And what you'll also see in these sections is a number of shifts that are funding shifts from general fund to special funds in this area. My next area that I have in the budget is B318, which is on page 11 of your web report. That's child development in the Department of Children and Families. There's really no change here, but we do move all of the school-based Medicaid funding to DEVA in the Department of Vermont Health Access. There is 1.7 million that you'll see moved to the Medicaid fund here, and it's a special fund change, but there's really no change in policy. My next sections are in the Department of Aging and Independent Living, Dale. It's on page 12 of the web report. It's B329, 330, 331, 332, and 333. In 329, you'll see a new position. It's a disability coordinator position. And then we moved in this section, you'll also see a shift. We moved from general fund to a special fund, opioid, and the opioid special fund. The reason this gets moved to opioid special fund is that there is employment recovery monies in that section. In B330, it's home and community-based service. There really is no change from the House, but there is a new housing coordinator position here. In B 331, you'll see the funding for the deaf, blind, and support services. A number of us received a number of calls about this. It's $150,000. What had been cut here was the phone services for the deaf and blind, and this restored that money. So it restored really the phone services for them. In B 332, there's a technical correction, and you'll see movement of funds to the opioid special fund here. In B 333, you'll see the increases to our designated agencies in that section. In B 334, you'll see rate increases for traumatic brain injury and the TBI increases in the base waiver amount. In B 334.1, this is all rate increases for the AAAs, residential care, personal care services, home and homemaker services, respite care services. You'll see increases for adult days, choices for care, and adult family services. It's a little unusual in the way they did the calculations across the board, but when I say rate increases, these rate increases are slightly more than 1% this year. So it's not huge increases. The next areas of the budget that I had were in the Commerce Agency. All of the funds that are increased here are in the B1100s, and those, the 1100s are the one-time lists in there. You'll find money for manufactured homes here. The rental assistance program, there's $1 million increase there. You'll see monies for first-time home buyers, and what you won't see, but it's in here, is the $4 million for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, VHIPE. That's all within this area, except for the $4 million in VHIPE. These are all one-time funds in the B1100s. You'll also see in this area in B1100G monies for the office that we have in Montreal, for the International Development Fund with the Canadians. You'll find money for the 250th Anniversary Commission. You'll find money for the Rural Industrial Development Program, the Small Business Development Centers, and the Law School Small Business Center. Something that is not in the web report, because there's really no change between the governor and the House and the Senate, is in B811. That's where you'll find VHCB. And what is of note here is they have been appropriated what is statutorily required within this area. As many of you can remember, for many years, we've not withstood the statute, but this fully funds the HCB to what they were statutorily required to do. In the back of the bill, in the E sections, the 504s, from 504.1 to 504.5 is all of the language for adult basic education. I think this is the third year, or maybe fourth year, but at least 3 years, that we've been dealing with trying to move to a new formula. This finally institutes the new formula for adult basic education. Hopefully we can stabilize the programs within adult basic education, and we heard no complaints from anyone about this, which seems like a miracle. E312 is the AIDS language and the money to organizations like Vermont Cares. This is standard language that we put in every year. E313 is the substance misuse prevention language in the back of the bill in E313. And it deals with school-based programs, and it moves the school-based programs, prevention programs in this section. And finally, in C106, which is language in the back, it's housing assistance language. We set aside $50 million last year to deal with federal changes. This would add as a service the housing assistance program into that area. At this point, I will yield to the senator from Chittenden South, Senator Lyons.
Senator from Lamoille yields to the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the senator from Lamoille, because I think you covered some of my sections, which was really helpful. I will mention those as we go through. My sections of the bill are in the B300s as well as the B1100s for the one time, and then some of the E sections that relate to those sections. I looked at the central office, DEVA, Dale, DCF, Department of Mental Health, and Department of Health for different areas. And within that, including both the individual needs that are pressing, very pressing in our state, as well as the organizational folks who help provide services for those individuals and the pressures that those organizations are feeling. I think we all feel those pressures very much, and sometimes we feel like we're making Sophie's choice. Sometimes it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that is a continuing theme within the area of human services, as we know. So, and the pressures are exacerbated by what's happening at the federal level with HR 1, the effect on SNAP, the effect on Medicaid, the increased need for state funds for matching that we will have to do going forward, and the Child Care Fund, administrative contracts needing additional dollars, DCF facing the need for shelters, and so on. So overall, I think the administration initially focused on $80 million of pressures facing us. We've been meeting that challenge carefully, and I hope that your Senate will appreciate the work that Senate Appropriations has done to meet the needs of people and the organizations that serve people in our state. So beginning with the central office is responsible for global commitment and achieving the match that we have through state and federal dollars. We've added slightly more than what the House has requested in that process. We have looked in the central office at our AAAs, Meals on Wheels, transportation for other services, choices for care, the intermediate needs and daily living needs, home and community-based services, the Department of Mental Health elder care improvement programs, designated agencies, specialized service agencies, and increases for those folks, to $6 million increase for those folks. We, through the central office match, have restored AHEC, as the senator from Lamoille described. We are, with our struggling workforce, to help our APRNs and our other primary care docs. We have looked at restoring the co-pays for Medicaid to be more in line with states around us, and that's through the match at the central office. So rather than going up from $0 to $4 per drug for non-preferred drugs, and $3 to $8 for preferred drugs for Medicaid patients. We have taken that back in our bill to $0 to $3. It's hard to imagine that Medicaid patients would have the dollars to support the proposal that we received. So moving into, that really represents what is in B 300, 301. And then looking at B 307 at DIVA, I think some of that information has already been shared, but it is related to Medicaid match for drug purchasing. We have changed that. There are also 12 new positions that will be needed as we begin to comply with the Medicaid pressures going forward, looking at the administration of the work requirement that's come to us. There's also money in 307 with our federally qualified health centers, the Rutland Health Center, to increase funding. There's also funding for the Northern Family Institute, which is important for providing behavioral health services for younger folks. B306 through 309 are very much related to our the information that the senator from Lamoille has already shared regarding a shift from of Medicaid dollars to DIVA, to the Department of Vermont Health Access, to improve the efficiency and the utilization of those funds. And there is related language in the E500 and 502 section regarding that. B314 is Department of Mental Health. We concurred with the House for improving the certified community-based services and centers for elder care, increasing funding for our DAs, our SSAs, and mental health services overall. B316, DCF administration. This relates, and it's also in the central office because it is match funding for our 211, 211 hotline services. We did fund that at 50%. We received conflicting information at the beginning of the session and then as we went through the bill. So we have it at 50%. I'm sure there'll be a discussion going forward, but this will allow for the evening hours to be covered by the 211 services. B317 as a Family Services Division of DCF. We concurred with the House for increased supervised visitation, and this is in conjunction with what the senator from Lamoille, from Franklin has indicated about a crime victim services exchange. B321 through 325 relate to the General Assistance Program and what we know is a homelessness issue that faces our state. And that's in those sections of, or many of those sections of the bill, about $21 to $22 million are currently in H938, which your Senate Health and Welfare Committee is evaluating right now and will hopefully get to the floor as soon as we can. So this will improve the outcomes for homeless folks and to improve services for those folks who are without a place to live. B345 is the Green Mountain Care Board. The Green Mountain Care Board is responsible for funding the Healthcare Advocate Office, and there's an increase in funding for the Healthcare Advocate this year through a process known as Billback, and we included that in the bill. And that is also covered through our global commitment, so there is a match that improves that. So overall, your Senate did increase the bottom line for human services representing about $6 billion of the state budget. And the House was over the governors by 0.3, and we were over the House by about 0.02. So we're all trying to stay within a budget that will help people, but at the same time will not destroy our pocketbooks. It's not easy, and it's sad when you see that some people do not benefit from the work that we do. We also looked at B 1100, one-time funding, added $1.5 million to the Provider Stabilization Fund. As you know, this is a section, this is monies that's put aside for organizations that are not eligible for our extraordinary relief funding. And there was $4.2 million left over that is available, and we've added a $1.5 million to that. Some of the money that the House included that we did not include was also utilized in our effort to improve primary care. B1100C with DCF section, this is again related to one-time funding related to the provisions in H938. We do concur with the House. The work in their Senate Health and Welfare Committee will be to determine how best to use that fund in the categories that we have. And so how to provide funding for folks to move from zero housing to affordable housing. There's also money in here for the local food shelf support, about $700,000, and also the post-permanency adoption services. These are for folks who adopt and then find themselves in need of help as they move into independent living. 1100D is the Secretary's office, within which is Meals on Wheels, primary care payment, and post-permanency adoption. So it's somewhat redundant with what we looked at earlier. B1100I, Department of Health. There is S243 is a bill that passed out of this body, and it includes, I shouldn't say body, out of the Senate. It includes $150,000 for the Language Justice Project that we approved earlier. I will say there are also two other bills that have been through the Senate, S190 and S197. S190 includes language for our treasurer to look at nationally, to work with others on trying to consolidate insurance programs so that we have a larger risk pool for our insured. And S197, which also had given the direction to the treasurer to look at the northeastern states and to consolidate in some way to build a primary care program across our regional area. 1100J, Department of Mental Health. This is the Community Resource Center, the Champlain Valley Community Resource Center funding. This organization has received one-time funding since 2020, and we have added, funding for that program. It is a half-a-year funding, so I'm sure there will be a discussion about that. But the half-year funding also allows for us to look at primary care and improve the payment to primary care providers at a time when they could be left without payment, with a reduction in payment. And then we also, in that section, Jay, there's the Howard Center Community Outreach Project, which the Senate added back in. That was not in the House proposal. And that's an important way of reaching folks in need in the local area. 1100K is Dale. This is the Adult Day program. We added $100,000 for the Washington County Adult Day. These are people who absolutely need some support, community service support, and this is critical for them. There's also funding for Meals on Wheels in that area, and we know that I know Meals on Wheels is a constant concern for all of us, and we've continued to add funds into it, and we need to continue to do that. Excuse me. But we also know that we have assisted community care services, we have AAAs, and we have others that provide meals and support for people at home. We have Choices for Care to keep an eye on folks. So having Meals on Wheels is one piece of a puzzle. And so we know that hopefully we can fill the gaps. No, hopefully we can put the puzzle together. That's really very important. And I am as concerned as others are about how we can do that. I also had sections E504, 504, which is the language on and funding for literacy programs in the state. They're critically important to keep going. And then Senator from Loyal has already mentioned 504.2, which is adult education. There is language in the bill that supports much of the work that we've done. One of those areas that I will mention is on the conflict-free case management for our designated and specialized service agencies. The federal government has made a requirement as to how those agencies provide their services separate from how they provide or how case management is provided. So there's language in there to continue to get at how best those organizations can work together with the Agency of Human Services. So with that, Mr. President, I think that I move to the senator from Grand Isle, Senator Brennan. Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from Chittenden yields to the senator from Grand Isle.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to go over some of the sections of the budget that I'm in charge of, very few of them had a change from the governor's recommend, but I'll list them anyway. Agency of Digital Services, Department of Human Resources, VOSHA, Enhanced 911 Board, Department of Labor, Vermont Council of the Arts, Vermont Symphony Orchestra, Vermont Historical Society, Vermont Humanities Council, Agency of Transportation. So I'll start with section B808, which is the Vermont Council on the Arts. And what we did there was a house change of $38,645, and that was basically to allow them to match all of the federal funds available to them. So that takes care of that section. Transportation. So in transportation, that's section B903. We had some movement. We moved money around there, and I'll explain that. You'll see under personal services a Senate change of $1.7 million. That is basically a swapping of TIB funds, which can be used for, they have a useful life project use of 20 years or more. Can't use it for paving, can't use it for anything without that useful life. So if you've driven the state and you've been around some of the interstate roads, state roads, even your local roads, you know that we're in dire need of more paving. So what we do in section 903 is we swap transportation funds, which can be used for district leveling paving, for TIB funds. We take $1.7 million of structures and bridge funding, and we move TIB funding in to do that, take the place of that, and use the transportation funds and put it into district leveling. It doesn't accomplish everything we need it to, but it does increase that budget, the district leveling budget, to $8.7 million. And it will allow us to pave 24 miles of state roads. And just to give you an example of why we're doing that, in this year's transportation budget, not to spill the beans at all, but we are paving 92 miles of interstate highway and 56 miles of state highway. Okay, we have well over 3,000 miles of state roads. This is not good. So we're doing everything we can in this section of the budget to help alleviate that, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what we actually need. There is also a $50,000 appropriation in there from the general fund which is it reduces transportation funds. It's not from the general fund, I'm sorry. It's from the transportation fund. And it's funding for Drive Electric Vermont, which is, again, a very good use of those funds. Next section is B1100H, again, a transportation section. We add an extra, let me start with the House. They added 1.36 to the governor's recommend. We add another 1.647 to the governor's recommend. The House, the governor's recommend had an initial 1.36, which is basically relocating the central garage. In the Senate, we add the 1.34 million for disaster relief, basically communities impacted by the 2025 flooding up in the Northeast Kingdom and all over the state. And it also has $300,000 for non-emergency medical transports, which is also a very good use of transportation funds and sorely needed. Couple more. Department of Labor, a small increase there. We added we concurred with the House. It's a reduction of a request of $600,000 to $200,000 for Advance Vermont. That's in section B1100N. And the next and last of my sections is B1100W. And this is a Senate change adding $25,000 to general fund money for the funding for the Lake Champlain International Derby, something we've been funding for years. It's one time we do it. We've had a tendency to do it every year. So that completes my sections of the budget that are impacted. And with that, I'll yield to the senator from Chittenden, Senator Baruth.
Senator from Grand Isle yields to the senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only good thing about coming in a couple of hours after we began is that many of my sections have been touched on or described. So I'm going to limit my presentation to the places where we truly differ from the House. But I do want to note that, as has been reported by other senators, we had the Human Rights Commission. We had a request from them for a staff investigator and a request to retain their vacancy savings. We gave them both of those requests. We had the Ed Transformation money, $1.5 million, which was discussed. I think the committee had wanted a little more, but we believe that 1.5 million would move us through this phase of education transformation. And then the State University and UVM have got their 3% bump in their base budgets, which we do every year. Beyond that, our biggest difference with the House concerns the Higher Education Trust Fund. And I'd like to just take you through a bit of that history. So UVM has been working for a couple of years on what they call the Multipurpose Center project. And that is a way of thinking about this center from different angles. It is an exciting economic development project. It is also a sports stadium. It is a performance venue. And it also houses classes for instruction and student services and wellness. So all of that is contained in this. It is on a scale of, if senators are familiar with Memorial Auditorium, we used to host in Burlington any larger event at Memorial Auditorium. Unfortunately, Memorial Auditorium is now defunct, and there is no place at this scale to host an entertainment event, a concert, or a very large sporting event. So UVM came to the governor's staff in the drafting of the governor's budget and asked for $20 million toward this project. The governor's team, from reports I've heard, found it to be a very exciting project, but there was not $20 million in the general fund to spend on this. But there was a one-time windfall into the Higher Education Trust Fund that dwarfed any other year's revenues into that fund. So just to give you an idea, the Higher Education Trust Fund in a normal year might take in $1 million, sometimes under $1 million. Some years, it's been in existence for about 27 years, some years, $5 million. And in 2011, I believe, there was a $10 million windfall. This is $26 million. So if you were to fund the governor's $15 million request in his budget, you would still put more into the Higher Ed Trust Fund than it has ever received in 1 year. So the governor, as you remember in his State of the State speech and his budget speech, did talk about this project and did come forward with a proposal for $15 million. The House, in looking it over, decided they did not want to go that route. But if you look into the House budget, you will see they put $2.32 million in for Freedom and Unity grants. Freedom and Unity grants are VSAC grants that go out to students whose families make less than $65,000, and it allows them to go tuition-free to a state university. So it is helping our neediest Vermonters go to college and hopefully leverage their families upward socioeconomically. So it began to seem to our committee as though there might be a way to accomplish what the House wanted to do and what the governor wanted to do with a different sort of construct. So I will describe the construct to you that we finally settled on. The $15 million that the governor had in his budget, we divided up like so. $12 million now goes to the multi-purpose center project at UVM. The House's $2.32 million for Freedom and Unity grants is still in there, but now funded not from the Technology Modernization Fund. There was $9 million that the House used from that fund. You heard from the chair of appropriations earlier that that was objected to by the governor because they need that money for computer upgrades. So we put $12 million toward the multipurpose center, $2.32 million toward Freedom and Unity grants, and then the state university has, for a number of years, been trying to build something called the McClellan Project. The McClellan Project is a 30-unit housing pilot, I would call it, on the Johnson campus. It will sit on an existing parking lot, and they are hopeful that they can do it in phases on the Johnson campus and then scale it up around Vermont State University property. The thinking there is that along with, on the Johnson campus, moving some services, municipal services from the town onto the campus, this housing project will allow people who aren't students to live on campus alongside graduate students and their families. So that is a $600,000 ask that they came to the legislature for. We have not been able to find that money, but if you plug it into this construct, that is $15 million. 12 to the multipurpose center, the Freedom and Unity grants, and this shovel-ready design for the McClellan project. So the only thing in my mind remaining was, is it right to take that money in the first place from the Higher Education Trust Fund? Now, in my first biennium, I was a trustee for the Higher Education Trust Fund, so I take a back seat to no one when it comes to preserving that money. So I wanted to know, was there a way to make the trust fund whole? To make the trust fund whole and to make it healthier going forward. So what the committee did was to take 20% of our cannabis excise tax and feed it directly into the higher ed trust fund. So this is what that means. Currently, the cannabis revenue goes like this. Any sales tax goes to after-school programs. That was the governor's request when he signed the bill. We honored that request. That money is not touched. So that sales tax now directly supports after-school programs. Then 30% of the excise tax currently goes to substance misuse prevention. That was our Health and Welfare Committee's ask. That is not touched. What we're talking about now is an additional 20% of cannabis excise tax feeding directly into the higher education trust fund. That's between 4 and 5 million a year. So if we do that, in 3 to 4 years, we will pay back the $15 million in the governor's budget. And going forward, that will be $4 to $5 million additional into the corpus of the higher ed trust fund. So from my own point of view, everybody won. You have these projects being built for economic development and crucial housing needs. You also have now, in this construct, a dedicated revenue stream into the higher ed trust fund so that needy families in the freedom and unity space can continue to get more money. And over at CCV, they have a similar program for families under $100,000. So those families would have their expenses for college defrayed more and more as we go forward under this proposal. So the last thing I'll say is that one might look at this proposal in isolation and say, why is UVM getting 12 million and Vermont State University getting 3 million? And I just need to give you the broader historical context. If you go back 15 years, when I came in, there was a very strict rule of thumb on appropriations that $1 for UVM was $1 for the state colleges. And that kept peace in the family, and it allowed both institutions to move forward at the same pace. But problem being, as you all know, if you go back to 2020, the state colleges had what I would call an existential crisis. We were looking at needing to close 3 campuses. We were looking at essentially the collapse of our state college system. So we impaneled a blue ribbon panel, which I served on, and we came out with a transformation plan that unified the state colleges into the state university, and that directed over the next 5 years, hundreds of millions of dollars to the state colleges, now the state university. That, as you heard earlier on in this session, that worked. The state university is now a thriving operation. This McClellan project, I think, is proof of that. They are going through their footprint on their various campuses. They're slating some things to be closed, sold, or demolished, and they are building things that will give them a revenue stream going forward. So I think our work on the state university has been highly successful. What this construct will do is direct millions more to them through the higher ed trust fund. And if you're not familiar how that fund works, every year, whatever is in the fund over 125% of projected revenue goes directly in payouts of equal amounts to UVM, the State University, and VSAC. So they all get $1, $1, $1 out of the fund, up to 5%. Then, if there's more, a windfall in the fund, they might, all 3 of them, get an additional 2% per year. So, in my mind, this has the potential to be game-changing for UVM in terms of economic development and campus life. Vermont State University in terms of much more in the way of scholarships for needy Vermonters. VSAC also has their administrative revenue come off of that. And at the end of the day, Mr. President, I think we accomplished the chair of appropriations talked about the 4-legged stool. Economic development is very much one of those legs. So we are helping needy Vermonters send their kids to college, and we are creating and enabling one of the most vibrant economic development projects in recent history. Happy to answer questions after we're done. And with that, I would move back to the Chair of Appropriations.
The senator from Chittenden Central yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, everybody, senators, for your patience going through this long presentation, but that is what you get when you have a $9 billion budget. A couple other things I want to mention. If you'll notice in the one-time sheets, they list a lot of the H bills, the House appropriation, just in the timing of the bill. They kind of have a catch and release policy where if they like the bill, they'll release it to go to the Senate, but they'll put the money in the budget for that bill. If the bill passes, then the monies are accounted for. We have more of a catch and gut policy where we gut them and then send them on to the House. But then later, when we're doing the budget, we put that money back in. So the S bills aren't seen on the sheets, but when we funded S bills, they would be in the budget. But I have a sheet here that lists. So if you have a specific question, like whatever happened to S-198, the tobacco bill, it'll say kind of whether we funded it or not, or what parts that we funded. So I didn't hand that out, but I can show you that. I also have a handout a sheet about all the reserves. Sometimes there's questions about all the different reserves that we have, unofficial and official reserves. I can go over that. And last, I have all of the witnesses we had. We had a public hearing with the House. There was 82 witnesses that presented at that hearing. That's where we got like $20 million in asks from the public and nonprofit sector. In committee, we heard from 136 witnesses. This is a gamut from the organization that works with our county fairs and people that run county fairs, up to the Commissioner of Finance and Management and all the secretaries and commissioners of all the departments as they presented their budgets. I will not read you all 136 names. So that, Mr. President, really concludes our presentation. The vote out of committee was 7-0-0, and we asked for the Senate support of this amendment. Thank you.
I recognize the senator from Chittenden, Senator Chittenden, for the report of the Committee on Finance.
The Senate Finance Committee reviewed this bill, and we did not make any changes to it, and we supported it on a vote of 7-0-0. Thank you, Mr. President.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, I was mistaken. It was 6-1-0.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment that will be passed out, I believe. We just heard a lengthy explanation from the senator from Chittenden Central about how the budget deals with some funding in the Higher Education Trust Fund. So my amendment would amend those sections of the budget. It doesn't look like much because of the way the budget is drafted, but it would amend, if you're looking at the bill, the addendum to the calendar, if you go to page 60 and 61, it would eliminate the $600,000 from the Higher Education Trust Fund that goes to the McClellan Hall Housing Transformation Project. That's T, I believe, and subsection T on that page. And then at the bottom of that page, subsection X, which is the funding that goes to the University of Vermont, the $12 million for the multi-purpose center project, which I believe is basically a basketball center. So that's what the amendment does, and I just wanted to provide a little explanation. The Higher Education Trust Fund was created in the late 1990s by the legislature, and it is a trust fund, an endowment for student scholarships at our public institutions in the state, at UVM, this Vermont State Colleges, or Vermont State Universities now, and the Community College of Vermont. It is a way to have scholarship funding in perpetuity for Vermont students that attend Vermont universities. So it both benefits the young people in our state, and it also benefits the institutions themselves, because they are able to get students who can afford to go to those institutions. And it's created as an endowment so that each year a certain percentage of the fund is invested in student scholarships. As the senator explained, about 5% of the fund goes to scholarships per year. And then there's 2% that if there's a good year in the fund, 2% is divided between, I believe it's just the University of Vermont and the state college system, to actually enhance their endowment. So it is a perpetual fund that benefits students and the financial health of our public education institutions in Vermont. It is not to be used there's statutory and rules that govern this fund, and there is a committee that oversees the fund that includes 2 legislators. And the fund has, as I said, for student scholarships and for the financial health of these institutions. And what this presentation or this proposal proposes is to use part of that fund for building projects, for a basketball stadium and for a housing project. And while the housing project in particular sounds like a good idea, it is a building project. This is a fund for scholarships for students who are low-income students who, without scholarships, could not afford to attend our public universities in Vermont. And as the senator from Chittenden Central did say, there was a quote-unquote windfall into that fund last year, because part of the funding for that fund, or the majority of the funding from that fund, I believe, comes from the estate tax. There was somebody, frankly, who had a lot of money who died last year. And so there was a windfall into that fund for that reason. And while I know that when there are windfalls that happen, it's really tempting to want to spend those on something else, this is an endowment fund that is invested by the treasurer's office so that we have perpetual scholarship funding for students who are needy. I'm the mom of 2 current college students. I've spent the last number of years funding 3 kids to get through college. It is really, really expensive, Mr. President, to send your kids to college these days. And without the scholarship money that my kids got, my kids would not have been able to attend college or university. We could not have afforded it. And I am a lucky person and have the ability to be able to send my kids to college. And I want that for all Vermont families who want to send their kids to college. We have amazing institutions of higher education in this state. Many of us in this building have benefited from that, and we need to make sure that all Vermonters can afford to. The average scholarship that this fund gave last year, I think, was $1,400, which is a complete drop in the bucket. If we have a windfall in this fund, we should be using it to increase scholarships. $2,800, $14,000. We should be increasing student scholarships, not spending it on a basketball stadium, Mr. President. And in addition to that, we have scholarship money that we have student needs in other areas, graduate student needs. We have a shortage of doctors. We have a shortage of teachers. We have a shortage of social workers. We have a shortage, frankly, actually, of lawyers in this state. So there are many other scholarship needs for students in this state that this fund could be used for. So while I appreciate the potential economic benefits of a basketball center in Burlington, I think it is a completely inappropriate use of this fund. And similarly for that housing. So this amendment would retain the Freedom and Unity Scholarship transfer, the one-time increase in those scholarships. I think those scholarships are amazing, and I'm very supportive of using this fund for increased scholarships, but not for building projects. I think it should, if we want to fund a building project at UVM, that is a great thing, Mr. President. That should come out of our capital budget. That is how we fund building projects in this state, is through our capital budget. And so if the University of Vermont would like to make a request to the governor to include it in next year's capital budget, I would be very supportive of that. But as it is, Mr. President, this is an inappropriate use of the Higher Education Trust Fund, and the whole scheme to pay back the trust fund takes dollars out of our general fund. Our general fund is used for incredibly important purposes, as we just heard through this budget presentation. And I'm going to quote the senator from Lamoille, if I may, Mr. President. When he came into the Senate Finance Committee the other day to talk about the transportation budget, he said that the general fund is the fund that protects vulnerable people in Vermont. And I agree with him, and we should not be taking funds out of the general fund to ultimately support a basketball stadium in Burlington. So, Mr. President, that is my amendment. It would remove the funding for both the basketball stadium and the housing project, and retain the Freedom and Unity grants from the Higher Education Trust Fund. And I ask the Senate for their support. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the senator from Addison. She did contact me about this amendment. Since we're starting early in the morning, we didn't really have time to have her into the committee, so I'd like to ask for a quick recess so the committee could consider.
We'll take a brief recess. Will the Senate please come to order? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, your Appropriations Committee talked about this. We had talked about it, obviously, in committee when we were kind of going through this construct, but the committee's decision on the amendment was the straw vote of 7-0 opposed to this amendment. And I'll just say a couple words. In addition to being the chair of appropriations, I am the Senate's designee on the Higher Ed Trust Fund at this time. So I'm familiar with the trust fund and how it works and how it's supposed to work. The senator from Addison is correct. We are notwithstanding the language in the trust fund to do this, but in the Senate appropriations mind, this was an appropriate use of the money. There were talks earlier in the session, and this came up at the Higher Ed Trust Fund, of folks want to change the construct of how money goes into the trust fund. So you could get around with not doing the notwithstanding by changing the law that says the excess estate tax goes into the trust fund. And then you wouldn't have to take it out of the trust fund. You just prevent it from going there. So you could get away with not having to do with the notwithstanding. I thought this was a little more honest about notwithstanding and saying for this purpose, it does make sense in this kind of construct. I think a lot of folks were at first concerned about it, but the fact that there was a way to pay it back really made the difference, and not only paid it back, but continued the commitment to increasing those scholarships. As the senator from Madison County said, that we want to have more scholarships, not less. And this is a way to get us there. The other thing we mentioned was that this amendment still would have money coming out of the general fund. It doesn't affect the excise tax going to the trust fund, so which is part of the whole package that we liked of this. This still would have that impact because this just amends our appropriations out of the trust fund, but it would still have that money going into the trust fund. So we encourage the Senate. We understand the senator from Addison's commitment to scholarships, and we share it. We think this in the long run is the best construct, and we encourage the Senate to vote no on this amendment.
Senator from Windsor.
I rise in support of the amendment presented to us by the senior senator from Addison, although I do appreciate the due diligence and work of the Senate Appropriations Committee. I will be voting yes on the amendment because I feel it's extremely important to signal to our constituents that our priorities are in line with the same types of budgetary decisions they're making at their homes. They're not going to basketball games as often. They're not investing in home projects as often because they are unable to afford those types of luxuries as our economic future becomes more and more imperiled. I think, unfortunately, while we have heard the argument a D1 school deserves D1 accommodations, that we became a D1 school and a successful D1 school without those same accommodations, where we are winning national titles and championships without robust stadium accommodations. I would also argue that we have a national champion debate team, an internationally ranked debate team, and there has never been a proposal for funding of a scholarship to them. So it feels as if we are prioritizing a culture of sports fandom over real reality. I worry about cost overruns to a giant stadium project that we will hear over the next few years that we somehow are on the hook for, because we have taken the unprecedented step of pivoting a scholarship fund towards capital investments. Those large construction projects like stadiums that you hear about in major cities don't often become financially sustainable for those cities. They become places where they have falling down infrastructure in the long run, similar to the large investments we've made in other arenas where we then haven't had the financial ability to maintain it. So I question the cause behind this, although I understand the desire to have good seating accommodations at a sports game. In conclusion, I completely support this amendment because I do not believe it benefits the citizens of Windsor County to have a funded stadium in Burlington.
Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested, and when the vote is taken, it shall be by roll. The question is, shall the recommendation of amendment of the Committee on Appropriations be further amended as recommended by Senator Hardy? Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Brew.
No.
Senator Beck.
No.
Senator Benson.
No.
Senator Bungert.
No.
Senator Brennan.
No.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Chittenden.
No.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Caldwell.
No.
Senator Cummings.
No.
Senator Hewlett.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
No.
Senator Hashi.
Yes.
Senator Heffernan.
No.
Senator Engel.
No.
Senator Lyons.
No.
Senator Major.
Yes.
Senator Matos.
No.
Senator Morley.
No.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Persley.
No.
Senator Plunkett.
No.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
No.
Senator Bohosky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
No.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Wesley.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Those voting yes, 7. Those voting no, 23, and the amendment fails. The question now is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise. First of all, I want to thank the Appropriations Committee for just a phenomenal job as far as how you report a huge bill. It's pretty impressive the way you got through it and got so much information. And what I'm about to say isn't any disrespect to the fine work that the committee did. I just believe that at this point in time that we're spending too much money. I think that we're $2 billion over budget. And I believe that our role in government is to fund government. I'm really bothered, it's been said before, I'm really bothered that there are some parts that we're just not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I blame everybody involved, including all of us, the governor's office, the House. But when I look at when we start the budget process and we immediately fund transportation light, we immediately fund institutions light, we immediately fund a lot of different parts of government light, but yet keep on supporting other parts of government that grew during the COVID shutdowns and all the COVID dollars that came with the promises that once that money was gone, that those programs and positions would be gone. We haven't done that yet. So we're struggling amongst our own weight to fund programs that shouldn't probably be here at this point in time. We are government. We owe it to ourselves to fund government first before we do anything. We need to make sure that as we fund government, that we run efficiently. And I think that we're just in too many areas at too many times. Match dollars. If we're going to get free money from the federal government, we ought to be making sure that we take advantage of that in every opportunity that we can. I have mentioned transportation when we're $30 or $40 million light. We're paving 56 miles of road this year, and we should be paving 200. I look at institutions, we have very big things that are coming. The FEMA funds are going to come. That's going to have a match. We are potentially looking at $100 million of trying to find match money within the state to make sure that we fund these FEMA projects. I look at, we have build a women's prison that we're looking at, nearly $200 million worth of dollars once we get it all figured out. And at some point in time, other than trying to come up with those dollars at that time, we ought to be soaking some of those monies away. I look at school funding with the PCB problems that we have and these ancient buildings that we have. as without a doubt, we're going to see those pressures come back into our budgets. I'm bothered by the amount of positions that we're hiring. When you are struggling in a state to fund just government in itself, you've got to be mindful of adding positions. We were able to get through everything that we had in government when we had $14 billion, which I don't think that we spent in the right way, but we were able to get through those funds and spend at that time. And we did it without the extra positions. And so in uncertain times, everybody's got to buckle their belts up and do the right thing. So for now, I'm going to be a no on this budget. I'll watch it closely as it goes through. Again, no disrespect to the committee work that's done. I was very, very impressed with the hard decisions that were made with the monies that they've had. My problem, again, is that I believe that we're spending, as a state, $2 billion more than what we ought to be doing. And I have to be a no for now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I understand that there are still some bills in play, but it does appear, as the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee alluded to, that some of these bills that are still in play have been recognized, depending on whether they're in the Senate or in the House, coming from the Senate or the House, and some are not. And if I could interrogate the chair of Appropriations Committee.
The reporter is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have only two questions. One, which was alluded to from my colleague from Essex, and that is, in the bill, are we recognizing or not recognizing the testing and remediation of PCBs?
Mr. President, we are not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. And second, is there any inclusion in the budget to recognize the rebuilding of the, or expansion of the, or funding of the bonding for school construction?
Mr. President, there's not discussion in the budget about school construction, other than the money that we put held for education transformation. It wouldn't be enough, knowing the need of our schools, but whatever the education committees and the legislature comes up with around that, there's a tiny bit of money that could be used for that.
Okay. I thank the senator and thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the senator from Franklin?
The senator from Franklin is interrogated as a reporter of the bill.
I'm working from the web report, just so we can orient, but on page 4, section B205, I note that the committee decreased the amount of vacancy savings buyback. And my recollection from the Judiciary Committee is that the state's attorneys don't have really any vacancy savings. So would this require that they eliminate any positions?
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. No, this does not require them to eliminate any positions. In essence, we've simply cut any positions that have to the sheriff's office, and they can apply or come back to the Pay Act or come back during the BAA. They still have half of their vacancy savings, so it doesn't eliminate any positions, no.
Okay, so I appreciate for B207 with sheriffs, but I am wondering about state's attorneys. Their testimony was that they don't generally have vacancy savings. So I guess I'm wondering where the 50% that we are maintaining in their budget is going to come from.
Oh, B205, I'm sorry, I found it.
No worries.
Well, they were listed as $330,000. The money vacancy savings is through the state's attorney's office, and we simply cut that in half. So I guess I'm not sure about the question, Mr. President. They don't have positions eliminated, or they do?
I can rephrase. The state's attorneys testified that they needed their vacancy savings eliminated because they don't actually have those vacancy savings. And so if they are forced to balance their budget on those vacancy savings, they may need to eliminate positions. And so what the House, it seems, eliminated the vacancy savings as the state's attorneys asked, whereas we are putting 50% of them back. So would that mean they need to eliminate positions?
Well, I guess there's a possibility of that, Mr. President. I'm not aware of that particular testimony, and I may have been there. To be quite honest.
I would certainly appreciate a clearer answer, and I can reach out to the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs as well. My concern with our backlogs is that eliminating, and the fact that state's attorneys are generally carrying caseloads of 400 or more cases, is that eliminating any positions would be hugely detrimental to public safety. So I thank the senator.
I can certainly have that answer for the senator by third reading.
Thank you.
Senator from Orleans.
Mr. President, can I ask a question of the Senate Appropriations Committee Chair?
The reporter is interrogated.
On page 29 of the web report, the very bottom right, so the total Senate budget, I believe, is $9.363 billion. That be correct?
Yeah, that's also on the highlight sheet, yes. The total budget is, 9.367 billion.
So, Mr. President, I believe there's two different numbers. There's one on the highlight sheet that the chairman's talking about, and that's 9.367 billion. The one on the web report is 9.363 billion.
So what page of the web report, Mr. President?
29, Mr. President.
Maybe I have an older version. That's not on my page.
Oh, this is what was handed out, Mr. President. I'm on page 29, the bottom right hand.
Oh, okay.
For the Senate. Says 9.363 billion, I believe.
Yes, that is a different number. I don't know.
So that's the difference of about 3.6 million, Mr. President. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a good catch.
Can I spend that money, Mr. President?
Don't tell the senator from Essex you're spending any more money, but I will talk with JFO and we can rectify those, Mr. President, and make sure we see where the error is. I mean, sometimes we have these duplicated funds, but these are both unduplicated totals, so they should match out. So we will get the answer to that question.
And one more further question, and I'm going from memory. The global commitment dollars are Medicaid. I believe they're 1115 waiver dollars. And the governors recommend may have one budget number, the House budget number may have one, and the Senate Appropriations Committee may have one. And they're all different, but that just means that we're funding the Medicaid programs differently. Is that right, Mr. President?
Mr. President, I don't know if we're funding it differently. We're funding different things that are funded with global commitment dollars, so that could be a difference of the global commitment funds. But that should be properly accounted for as far as the question of the total. I don't know if that follow-up question was about the total or a separate question about.
Separate question.
And maybe you can rephrase the question just about the global commitment dollars.
So I understand it, Mr. President, global commitment is basically money from the 1115 waiver of the Medicaid dollars. Am I right in that?
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
So in the budget process, I see that there's a budget from the governor's recommend of X amount, we'll say, of global commitment dollars. And then you also may have a budget number for Medicaid or global commitment dollars from the House that was passed. And then the Senate may have passed a different number.
Yes.
Those, I'm guessing those different numbers are because we're funding different programs that are being paid for by Medicaid dollars. Is that correct?
We are funding different programs, and so between the governor and the House and the Senate, are funding different programs that have global commitment dollars. So if we fund different programs, there's going to be a different mix, and the number of global commitment is going to be different when we do that.
I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I intend to vote today for this budget. I do appreciate the work that House Appropriations has put into this and all the other committees that have fed into it. And I'm I'm tepidly excited that the increase this year is one of the lowest increases that we've seen in this building in a long time. But my reservations are, it's still a very big number. It's 1.6 billion more than we spent in 2020, inflation adjusted. And I think about what $1.6 billion could do. And I think about, we could eliminate the homestead education property tax, and we could eliminate the sales tax, and we could eliminate or greatly reduce the income tax for most Vermonters with that kind of money. And then I think about what kind of economy we would have if we reduce those taxes and those amounts, and what that would mean for the opportunity and economic growth in this state. And that growth would lead to even more revenue. And maybe we could use that revenue so that we could have a transportation fund where we had excellent roads and bridges, and a capital bill that we had the money to fix our buildings. And so while I will vote yes for this, and I do appreciate the work, we are not on glide path in this state, and we need to get there so that we can really open up this economy and get opportunity to our citizens, and also address their affordability concerns. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I respect the comments from the Senator from Caledonia, and I agree with them for the most part. And I've also heard some of these from constituents. So I just want to point out, of the $9 billion, $3.2 billion is federal funds. And that's really the growth that we've seen from 2020, or whatever year you want to pick, before COVID, is federal funds. I think this is good at the point of Senator Essex too, is like, are we going to succeed in weaning ourselves off those federal funds and not try to backfill it with state funds? But we still have federal funds flowing through the system. There's a lot of money that we're just earning on interest of the federal funds that we have here. And a lot of these federal funds, obviously all of them, have federal restrictions on them. So I would like to second his vision of like what different economy will we have if we could take $1 billion of that and do what we wanted to do with it, not what the feds are making us do. But that's kind of the reality that we're still living in. The increase that we've seen since COVID isn't because we've raised the state budget by that amount. It's really the impact of directly the federal funds, or the impact federal funds have had on spending of Vermont, and kind of the economic development part of that funds that has gone through the economy that's created the increase. I just wanted to point that out for senators. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. I applaud the work, as always, of the Appropriations Committee. They do a great job, and we feed them lots of challenges and opportunities. It's interesting to see what they've had to choose. I guess I would simply like to say, yes, the federal money has grown, but we still leave a lot of federal money on the table. We still are not spending enough to draw down all the federal money that might be available. And I believe that is a piece of the tension that we're also experiencing in this budget. And so while in a really tight budget year, we have chosen to restrict some of those opportunities, which is a problem that we face. I would just say, I will be supporting this budget, but it is very hard, given all the tough choices we had to make in our committees, to see something I support as an economic development opportunity for us to build a performance venue somewhere in this state that can accommodate the people that used to be able to be accommodated at the Memorial Auditorium. We are desperate to be able to have fabulous concerts for 5,000 people. To do that, though, at the risk of not at the risk, with not funding all the things that we desperately need to fund in this state, and to have to make some of those hard choices. That was a tough balancing act, and that is one that just gives me lots of concern in this budget. And I wish we had been able to fund it out of different pockets. That's, there we are. But I think in this year, in this very tight budget year, you have actually done a surprisingly great job threading this needle, and thank you. And I will be voting to support this budget.
Senator from Chittenden.
Mr. President, when I was a high school teacher, I often would ask my social studies colleagues, my economic colleagues, my history colleagues, can you give me an example anywhere in history, anywhere in the world where trickle-down economics worked? Show me that just cutting tax is going to suddenly lead to a wealthier, happier, healthier country. They could never point me in the direction of an example because it doesn't exist. So running a state costs money. Many of us stood up last year and we talked about the fear that we had, the dismay that we had with federal leadership and what was happening at the federal level. That is coming to fruition, and we're 1 year in. It's going to get harder. And what I liked about this bill is it attempts to keep Vermonters fed, housed, and alive. That needs to be our priority right now. So thank you, Appropriations Committee. I appreciate your work.
Are you ready for the question? Senator from Caledonia.
I'll provide one example. Look across the river at the tax structure and the spending of New Hampshire and their wealth and their income, and there's your example.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Constituents ask me one question more than any other. And it is, what can you do to keep my taxes from constantly going up? And I respond, the answer is very simple. Stop spending. This building has a tendency to say that the only way that we can do anything for people is to spend more money to do it and to add more staff to do it. This bill represented a great deal of hard work, a careful thought, and sound action in many ways. But we didn't stop spending, and we need to. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you ready for the question?
Roll call.
Roll call's been requested, and when the vote is taken, it shall be by roll. Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Brew.
Yes.
Senator Peck.
Yes.
Senator Benson.
Yes.
Senator Bonner.
Yes.
Senator Brennan.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Caldwell.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Gulick.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
No.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashi.
Yes.
Senator Heffernan.
No.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Major.
Yes.
Senator Matos.
Yes.
Senator Morley.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershing.
Yes.
Senator Plunkett.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Bohosky.
No.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Those voting yes, 23. Those voting no, 7. The ayes have it, and you have proposed to the House to amend the bill as proposed by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 951. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you. That has been a long morning. I appreciate the hard work from everyone. We will have third reading of this bill tomorrow, as well as the yield bill, and then however many other bills we can go through. So with that, Mr. President, I would move that pending announcements, the Senate stand in adjournment until Wednesday, I believe the 29th of April at 11 a.m.
You got it.
I'm looking around for my chief of staff. I believe it is 11 a.m.
It is. The senator from Windsor.
Over the weekend, a very important person had a birthday. And while I will not be regaling you with any information about his special Sunday birthday, you are invited to join for carrot cake with pecans in the cloakroom afterwards in honor of the senior senator from Windsor. Happy birthday. Oh, thank you.
Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Welfare is actually going on a field trip as soon as this session ends. The field trip is out in the parking lot. I guess that is the northern parking lot. And it is the Vermont UVM Cancer Center van is here, and it's an amazing mobile unit. So actually, you're all invited to share that field trip with us. And I guess either eat your carrot cake first or bring it along. So please join us.
Are there further announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1 o'clock. Bring your carrot cake or lunch.
Senator from Washington.
Senate Appropriations will not meet until 2 o'clock.
Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Government Operations will meet at 1:15.
Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate institutions will meet at 1.
Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, the Education Committee will meet at 1:15.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Windsor, I hesitated because I thought you were going to complain about the President Pro Tem using his phone on the floor.
I only used it as a clock.
The senator from Chittenden has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 29th, 2026. Are you ready for the question? If so, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we'll stand in adjournment until 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 29th, 2026.